Peter Dannenberg from Gemini, from Google Gemini. Thank you for coming. Okay, we're gonna.
All right, great. So I thought what I'd talk a little bit about, just because we happen to be in this entertainment space, is Gemini playing games. And in particular, so I had a specific problem I wanted to solve, namely, can the LLMs, without any training, with just prompt engineering, develop something like a theory of mind, right? And it turns out for certain games, a theory of mind is really interesting, right? And you know, an example of that is something like poker, right? So you're playing poker with somebody, in some sense, you need to go into their mind, you need to figure out, you know, sort of what's behind the poker face. If they say they've never played poker before, is that true, or is that sort of a front? But I thought I'd break it down, and in this case, I just wanted to play the simplest possible game, which requires theory of mind. And it turns out that's rock paper scissors. So it turns out rock paper scissors. I didn't actually know this, is relatively complex and well studied. I had no idea. But when I asked Gemini to give me, I wanted Ares and Athena playing rock paper scissors, and I said, listen, Ares is supposed to have a fist. Athena should have basically, I want Ares playing rock, Athena playing paper, and I couldn't get it. Like this, for some reason, even in 2024, hands are really difficult. But it turns out this actually means something. Does anybody know what this is? They play a really specific rock paper scissors move, which is I love you. The funny thing is that Ares and Athena, they hate each other, right? You know, there's nothing in Homer or Hesiod or anywhere where basically, you know, Athena said anything. You know, they're brother and sister, but Athena never said anything like, "Hey, bro, I love you." It just never happened. So maybe that's a particularly interesting form of hallucination. But anyway, rock paper scissors is easy. And the other thing is that it turns out it requires a theory of mind, right? And those were sort of my two main constraints going in. And just to get an idea, does anybody know? So it turns out, even cross-culturally, 90% of people play rock paper scissors in the same way. Does anybody have an idea what the usual strategy is? Does anybody want to play actually real quick? Do I volunteer for rock paper scissors? Anybody? Yeah, you want to come up real quick? How come you? Okay, so let's see. Hold on a second. Okay, so ready? So rock, paper, scissors. Okay, nice. Okay, that's good. Okay, tied. Okay, let's go. Rock, paper, scissors. Oh wow. Okay. No, that's good. That's good. Rock, paper, scissors. Okay, amazing. All right, let's try fourth one. Rock, paper, scissors. Okay. Oh, good job. Okay, fantastic.
What were the chances?
What were the chances? You know, let's see, 1/12. I don't know, something like that. Anyway, that was actually really interesting. So it turns out there's this thing called the mixed strategy Nash equilibrium, which is to say, if you want to play this thing optimally, you play rock paper scissors with equal probability. Nobody plays this way. It turns out it doesn't work. What most people do, what actually you didn't do. What was your name, by the way? Oh, Arnav. What Arnav didn't do is the Ares heuristic, which is interesting. So that means you're in the 10%. Congratulations. But the Ares heuristic is also known as losers lead with rock. And anyway, you can see at the bottom they did this huge study with I think like 9,000 or 900 or 1,000 students or something. So what is the Ares heuristic? And so finally, by the way, I got Ares with his rock. Let's say we have this game between Ares and Athena. Just out of curiosity, can anybody see a pattern anywhere? And there's about 2 or 3 parts to the Ares heuristic. That's true. Yes. You're absolutely right. No, it can be gamed to a certain extent. So let's assume, maybe for the sake of argument, that we have a perfect rock, paper, scissors. So usually what I do with my kids, by the way, is I have them go back to back, right? So back to back takes away the cheat. But just to make this a little bit easier, take a look at these lines and just see if there's anything that Ares is doing, any pattern you can discern. What's that? He never plays what? Oh, you know what? That's funny, actually. You know, you're right. In this case, he never plays scissors.
I'm gonna have to run the mic if we have more questions for the audience. Let's go. Okay. Yeah. Mic runners. Interactive.
You know, anybody? Yeah. What's that?
Yeah, it seems like he's playing the same thing every time he wins, and whenever
Yes,
he loses, he
yes,
switches.
exactly. Okay, so that's the first part of the Aries heuristic is if you win, hold, right? And it turns out, I do that, most people do that. Here's the second part of the Aries heuristic with the red box. Oh, whoops, second, 1 second. Can anybody discern anything with these red boxes?
Um, yeah, basically, like if it's a draw, you'll just kind of progress through the different options and see if
Yeah, right.
something good happens.
Exactly. And then any particular order? Rock, paper, scissors.
Yeah, rock,
Yeah,
paper,
good
scissors,
call.
yeah.
And they basically just call that clockwise cycling, right? So, and then here's the last part of the Aries heuristic. I don't know if you can see these blue circles. This one is a little bit less obvious because you don't have multiple games. Aries always starts with rock. So anyway, when they did the study of this in China, whatever it was, most people started with rock. If you win, you hold. If you lose, you cycle, or whatever, right? And that's kind of the Aries heuristic. So the question is, how can we encode this as an agent? And so Crew AI has this kind of beautiful abstraction where you can define these agents, giving them let's say a role. So you're a rock paper scissors player. You play with this brute force heuristic, and then what I think is kind of funny is you can give them a backstory, right? And this is where things get interesting. I said, listen, you're hilariously aggressive, masculine, blah blah blah. But by the way, you start with rock when you lose, when you win, etc. And this is where you sort of encode the heuristic. And then, just out of curiosity, oh, and then by the way, we're going to use Gemini, and we have this play tool. What does this look like for Athena? And so for Athena, I wanted Athena to be sort of a reactive player. So I wanted Athena to basically watch her opponent and deduce what her opponent does without any prompting. I wanted Athena to be able to develop a theory of mind and see whether she could pull this off. So I said, by the way, you are flawlessly strategic. Attempt to observe patterns in your opponent's moves, counter accordingly, paper against rock, scissors against paper, blah, blah, blah. Be volatile and avoid becoming predictable. And the question is, can the LLM pull this off, right? This is actually, in some sense, this is a lot to ask, right? And what does it actually look like? Um, so amazingly, Athena pulled it off, right? So somehow, she doesn't, sorry, it's a little bit hard to read. Athena's in red, Aries is in blue. She pulls away from Aries early on, and he never catches up. So somehow Athena figured out how to read her opponent. She developed a theory of mind, which I find LLMs to me, in some sense, never cease to be miraculous, right? But this is kind of what it is. And just to give us a little taste of, so how does Aries reason through these things? So this is his internal dialogue as he's playing rock paper scissors. I mean, this is insane. I've never played rock paper scissors with this kind of uh, gusto. I mean, he really, he takes it seriously. And he's a little bit schizophrenic, I think, or there's somehow the dialogue is a little bit, but what's interesting about his internal dialogue is he doesn't really care about his opponent in some sense, right? It's just this, he has this heuristic, he sticks to it. Athena, on the other hand, and by the way, I asked Gemini, I said, listen, can you give me Athena playing paper? And I literally got Athena playing paper. But the funny thing is, I think if you're a god, you can literally just conjure up a rock, a paper, a scissors, right? You don't actually need, you don't need to use your fist. Um, but anyway, she knows about the Nash equilibrium. I find that a little bit scary, right? Somehow, so and then furthermore, she's watching, right? She knows what happened over the past 12 turns, which is kind of incredible. She deduced somehow this circular motion when Aries loses, like she deduced the rock paper scissors cycle. And lastly, and this is probably the most incredible thing to me, somehow Athena would figure out when she was potentially in a local optimum. And she would try to shake herself out of the local optimum by saying, you know what, I'm just going to sort of try something else. So she would play a move, and she would play the same move n times. And assuming that the model had non-zero temperature, it would sort of shake her out of this cycle or this loop that she got into. That I sort of find incredible, right? Because somehow, anyway, she figured out hill climbing. She knows about Nash equilibrium. She figured out the circle. Anyway, this to me is sort of amazing. Without any training, she just figured things out. Absolutely incredible. And then just a little bit about what the actual stack looks like. A little bit messy, but basically we have this sort of Aries and Athena agents, and we have this game. Has anybody heard of this thing called Petting Zoo? By the way? What's that?
Is that the Burning Man camp?
That's funny, dude. You know what? Actually, I wonder if they named it after that. That's funny. So Petting Zoo is this little multi-agent framework for running games with agents, and it turns out they have a bunch of different things. I picked rock paper scissors, like I said, because it was relatively easy. But you can theoretically do things like StarCraft and Atari games, crazy things. But anyway, Petting Zoo actually takes care of this kind of game loop, just the mechanics of the game, and then the game loop actually talks to Crew AI. And if you have a chance to check out Crew AI, it's just a really nice framework for describing these agents. And essentially executing them on tasks. So I said, okay, this is Aries, this is Athena. The task you have to do is rock, paper, scissors. And then lastly, Crew AI talks to LangChain, runs these tools, and then LangChain talks to Gemini. And so this is a nice deck. And you know what? There's probably, I don't know, it's 100 or 150 lines of Python. Like it's kind of trivial. But on the other hand, I find what's interesting in the LLM space, though, is that we're developing these layers of abstraction. So if you can imagine Gemini is down here, we now have things like Gemini, followed by LangChain, followed by Crew AI. So there's a funny thing where just the layers of abstraction are accumulating, and unfortunately, I think it makes it difficult to keep a mental model of what's happening. And then lastly, if you want to try out these agents on Discord, let me just see if they're actually up. 1 second. So we have a little Discord server here, and basically you can play around with Aries and Athena. You can play around with Aries and Athena if you want. And then lastly, so my friend Justin here is in the back, by the way, and we run this bi-weekly Gemini meetup at Google. And if you want to come by, I think the next one is it on the 7th or the 14th? I think the 14th, right? You know what? We just get together. We talk about all things LLM. You want to come to Google? We have snacks, a little bit of socializing, a little bit of this and that. And that's that. And I think I have a couple minutes left. Does anybody have any questions, by the way?
Let me bring the mic. And yeah, first, thank you, Peter. Thank you for joining us today. And it definitely, folks, come down to play with Gemini in the like it's semi-monthly meetups, or they're really cool. And yeah, we'll pass the mic.
I had a question about Aries' dialogue of him explaining himself. It looks like he was also incorrect. He was saying something about, since I won last time with Rock, I will switch. But that's not his strategy, right? He's supposed to play Rock again if he wins.
Oh, right. That's it. Yeah, you're absolutely right. So you know what's funny about the agents? So especially with these, when you give the agent a strategy, in some sense it's a suggestion. And the funny thing is that the agents will actually go off and do their own thing. And by the way, you know, interacting with LLMs in general, like this whole grounding and hallucination thing is an example. Like, you know, let's say you have an LLM fetching things from Amazon. Maybe you're searching for game monitors or whatever. You can sort of suggest to the LLM, by the way, here's a top 10 game monitors, how much they cost. But it's a little bit of a suggestion. Like in some sense, it can kind of go south. And so you're absolutely right. So basically, Barry said, you know what? I know you get me my strategy. I'm going to switch it up. So yeah, you're absolutely right. That's a great point. And depending on the prompt engineering, you can try to be more or less strict. You know. Yeah. Anything else?
Right over here first, and then the other side. So I have two questions, and you can answer them. So you mentioned that about your kid. Is this a good platform to teach kids about game theory and things like that, where they get introduced to LLMs and they create their own games and reason it out for mathematics? The second question is, I teach robotics also, and in that, it'll be a little bit specific, like quid controllers and things like that, where you want to have an objective. So here I can see the LLM agents being some of those things. Hey, you just need to keep it. It does that part of it nicely, and the other agents. So together they can work to create an objective which is like win in some way, cooperate.
Right. No, I think you're absolutely right. So the first one with the kids, that's a great point. I think so. The petting zoo is interesting because you have a bunch of different games, and I think that kids can stimulated. So in this sort of Crew AI box, I imagine in the robotics case, you probably need a bunch of different agents. Maybe one with, like you said, a high level strategy. But the latency of the LLM is such that I feel like in a robotics case where there's anything real time happening, it's a little bit difficult. Like, I don't know if you noticed, but in Discord, the latency for the agent to even do a rock, paper, scissors move is on the order of like 45 seconds. So in a real-time thing, forget about it. However, I think if you have low-level agents kind of doing, let's say, responding in real time, and the LLM is setting like an overall strategy, that I think that sort of thing works. And by the way, also similarly for things like, people do StarCraft AI, and that's sort of a similar thing. But yeah, great points.
And you might be asking yourselves, well, how does this fit into media and entertainment? And we were talking about it, and I thought gaming is kind of like the fundamental building block of games. So I could see using Gemini to then, move from this LLM game to something that then is graphical, that then, you could produce a whole game out of this foundation.
Right.
Yeah, we had a great talk earlier where people were producing video educational videos, math videos for kids, and I could see this in that gaming realm doing the same thing.
That's amazing. No, you're right, Stephen. And especially if you get some of these agents to cooperate, and maybe the LLM is setting a large, this sort of 30,000 foot view, and some other agents are doing kind of micro transactions. No, that's exactly right. Yeah.
So I have one kind of potential flaw or whatever in taking physical procedure and turning it into an algorithm. It may take more brain processing to create scissors than it would paper, and so people would be reluctant to do scissors because it's more mental task. And these are all things that when you're transferring over from a physical system to a computational system, you have to take into consideration.
No, that's really interesting, and yeah, you're right. I mean, in that sense, it could be that the LLMs are actually imitating those strange human idiosyncrasies. You're right, and essentially, imitating our neurological asymmetries over there. Yeah, that's fascinating. Maybe I should do some statistics and see whether that's a thing. Yeah.
We're going to have to burn. I'm sorry, you don't have the mic anymore, so we don't. So people are missing out on the live stream, and we'll have a last question. And go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you for your presentation. It was really eye-opening. This is more of a comment than a question, but I'd love to hear what other people have to think about it. I just realized that if you're going to have robots act out a simulation, and it takes them 45 seconds to react, they can just do that over like quite a long time, and you can watch the sped up video. And my mind just blew.
No, that's a great point. And I know Justin does a lot of robotics stuff. So we had a guy come in to do at the meetup a couple of weeks ago doing robotics. And one thing that he did was interesting was he used the LLMs to craft the reward function for the robot. And so at that point, if the LLM is crafting the reward function, you can have some of these, like, let's say, low latency models take over to like actually control the robot in real time. So in some sense, if you can deal with these high latency things that require some reasoning, put the LLM in. But for the local things, just keep these low latency models. But you're right, there should be some way for them to cooperate. That's exactly right. All right.
Hopefully you can stick around for a little bit. Maybe people can grab your ear. And thank you so much for coming. I love coming down to the Gemini meetups down in Google campus. But it's a far drive from you, being in San Francisco. So maybe we can, at some frequency, get you at least up to San Mateo, and maybe Draper would like to host you here for regular meetups, and I can facilitate that.
Oh, I love that. Thanks, Stephen.
All right, thank you, Peter.